Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has gone 6 o'clock, so we will make a start on tonight's Cabinet meeting. So welcome everyone to the first meeting of the new municipal year. Item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. And there are a number of people in the audience who haven't been here before, so I will read it out so everyone knows. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyd's Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. Are there still issues with those ones up there? Okay. I also have to let members know that there are issues with the exits at the rear. They are temporarily out of action, so you will have to use the exits at the front of the chamber. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. I also advise that all or part of the meeting is being live streamed and recorded for future broadcast, and I'm aware that Councillor Condacor is also taking his own video. Item number 2 is apologies, and all of Cabinet are present. Item number 3 is declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest which is not already printed on the agenda? No? Okay. Item number 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 12th of April. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 5 is public consultation. I would advise those who have put their names down to speak that you are supposed to be speaking to the item on the agenda which is under consideration at the time. If you do wander off into other areas which are not contained within the report, then I will try and bring you back to the agenda item in question. In terms of public speakers, I'm aware that we have only item members on the Bedworth Civic Hall update. So I have Sam Margrave, Joanne Browning, Jane Law has submitted a statement which was circulated to all of the members of the Cabinet, but which won't be read out. Stephen Young, Nikki Smith, David Moore. No? Okay. Well, we'll give him a... Sorry? I think he's trying to get here, but he's waiting for it. Okay. We'll try and give him an opportunity to get here. Oh, is that Mr. Moore? No. Oh, okay. We'll try and give him... I'll leave him to the end if I have to. Okay. Christine Robson, Rachel Hardy, Janet Batterby, Wendy Snell, and Julie Whitehouse. Okay, thank you very much. So I will take those in the order that they are on the list. So that moves us on to agenda item number 6, which is the Bedworth Civic Hall update. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report sets out the next steps for consideration on the future operation of the Civic Hall venue following the expression of interest submissions. It will detail how we will progress that formal selection exercise in accordance with the legislation and guidance, published statutory guidance and the provisions of the Localism Act of 2011 and Section 123 of the Local Government Act of 72, specifically the timescales and the selection criteria for the forthcoming selection exercise. On the 9th of November 22, Cabinet approved expressions of interest for the venue. This resulted in 2 applications being received that were both put forward to the next stage. The approach adopted followed the statutory guidance for a community right to challenge as set out in Section 81 to 86 of the Localism Act of 2011. This was to ensure openness and transparency in the process. This approach also allowed commercial entities to submit expressions. As of the 11th of January 23, the venue was registered as an asset of community value pursuant to Section 88 of the Localism Act 2011 and is subject to the moratorium provision set out in Section 95 of that Act. The moratorium will apply to any asset disposal of a qualifying leasehold estate. This is defined within the legislation as being a lease of a term of at least 25 years. It therefore follows that the moratorium will not apply to a lease of less than 25 years. One last factor relating to the disposal of the venue: except with the consent of the Secretary of State, the Council can't dispose of the venue for a consideration less than the best that can reasonably be obtained. Usually this requires the land or property to be placed on the open market. For this reason, it is proposed that the selection process needs to be a full open bidding process with adherence to the principles of procurement. This will ensure that a fair and transparent selection process is undertaken. Cabinet's decision on the 12th of April to pursue a lease option for the facility now requires a formal bidding process, and it is suggested to undertake a process which aligns with the principles of procurement law. It is therefore proposed to follow the principles of the competitive procedure with negotiation, pursuant to the principles of the Public Contracts Regulations 2015. For the avoidance of any doubt, a lease arrangement falls outside the scope of the procurement regulations due to it being a property transaction, but the principles of public procurement are to be followed to ensure a fair and transparent process. To undertake this exercise as part of the process, the selection criteria needs to be approved and published. In addition, a timetable for the process needs to be determined. The suggested selection criteria is set out in Appendix 1 of the report, and a proposed timetable set out in Appendix 2. I therefore ask for approval of the recommendations as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Markham, and I will second that from the Chair. So we now move on to our public speakers, the first of which is Mr Margrave.
I'm here today to ask for the report to be deferred and for the Chief Executive to bring in the police and instruct an independent investigation into councillors, the Civic Hall decisions and misconduct in public office. Councillors have misled the public, and I present some of the evidence which I'll pass to the Chief Executive. Councillor Carl Evans told voters before the elections in 2022 the Civic Hall wasn't closing, but the council has published emails showing Councillor Evans in 2021 told officers what an independent council report must say, saying specifically it needs to mention the building is not sustainable in its current form and that Bedworth needs an arts facility at a much reduced rate capacity. In other words, the independent report wasn't independent, and it's been your plan all along to close the Civic Hall as a community venue and bring in the bulldozers no matter what. This isn't about money. The community has set out a plan to make the Civic Hall profitable and a success, to bring millions to Bedworth. Councillor Wilson, that's what any bid you said any bid would be judged on. This process and decision has been a fix from the start and stinks of corruption. There has been a series of lies and broken promises. In October, I asked Councillor Wilson if the Conservatives had decided in secret to close the Civic Hall before the elections. He said no. I was called a liar. Yet former Conservative Councillor Walmsley has said on record in April and October 2022 the Conservative group has lied and decided a long time ago that when the NHS moved out the Civic Hall, it would be mothballed and the council want to make money from building housing there. He also says councillors have a secret WhatsApp group. Will the Chief Executive publish a WhatsApp group so residents can see what our councillors have really been up to? It's no wonder you want to stop a community group getting the keys, because we might find out the truth about what's really been going on. This criteria doesn't require works listed in October 2022 to be carried out, and it certainly doesn't save the Civic Hall. It's a sham, and councillors are opening this council up to legal action. Bedworth and our borough deserves better. Thank you.
Any points of clarification to Mr Margrave? No, in which case we'll move on to Joanne Browning.
Good evening. This council is investing nearly £7 million in a Nuneaton Museum refurbishment, a new multifunctional community centre, and then close to £500,000 per year every year after that. The Abbey Theatre in Nuneaton also gets a peppercorn rent. While in Bedworth, the council is reducing our budgets to zero and closing our only town community venue. You even have to cheek to ask the community group to pay commercial rents to take on the failing Civic Hall. Does this sound fair? Does that sound like two towns being equal partners in this relationship? You told us that if we showed we could run the building profitably, as a community venture, we could have the keys and reopen the Civic Hall. But you keep changing the rules and breaking promises. Now you want to hand the keys to a commercial operator, but on the cheap. Let's not pretend this process is fair. It certainly isn't about getting a good deal for taxpayers. The Cabinet reports in paragraph 3.4 and 4.2 imply the Council cannot give this Civic Hall to the community without consent of the Secretary of State or this procurement process. But hidden in paragraph 4.2 are the words, "For the avoidance of any doubt, a lease arrangement falls outside the scope of procurement regulations." None of this needed, and the process and criteria is flawed. Many of the councils give community assets to the community for £1. That building was built by local people for future generations. The council has the community do the hard work. We've come up with a plan to make the Civic Hall profitable and retain the venue for community use. With us, you have an opportunity to get millions into Bedworth. A private business can't, to make the Civic Hall a success. We could apply to the Community Ownership Fund tomorrow if the council would work with us, instead of us putting more obstacles in our way. We haven't been able to get into the building. We need more than 6 weeks for this formal stage of the process. The EOI gave us 3 months. The council are being unreasonable and clearing off a community bid that could save the Civic Hall. Why do you hate Bedworth, Councillor Wilson, so much that you would deprive residents of a community space like Nuneaton are going to get?
Any points of clarification? No, in which case Jane Law has already submitted a statement, so move on to Stephen Young.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. When you make the decision tonight, I would ask that you think hard and consider some of the following points. The Civic Hall's journey started with people like us here and in the gallery and yourselves. They met and they decided to do something. They wanted a place to do activities and for clubs originally. Later, this was developed through various organisations into the dream of a community centre and a performance space in the heart of Bedworth. Later still, the mantle was taken up by Bedworth Urban District Council, and with Bulkington and Bedworth ratepayers' money, the Civic Hall was built. Those needs are still present today. They're still the same needs. We still need a community hub in the heart of the town, and from data from theatres and cinemas, there is an upsurge in the take-up of tickets for shows, driven partly by a COVID bounce back. When we started this journey to first save and then to try to run the Civic Hall, we were told by the council in this very chamber that a third sector model would be sought. This was a resolution put forward by Councillor Golby and passed accordingly. We formed a CIC and entered into the process in good faith. A process that first asked us to take on the running of the services offered by the council at the Civic Hall. The rules then changed to allow businesses to put EOIs in. If the council decide tonight to go ahead with the proposals in the report, they will change the rules again and almost, but not quite, exclude us from being able to put a reasonable bid in. There seems to be no mention of providing the service or the arts centre, which I'll add is a themed community centre and was used by arts and many groups that would be called community groups and clubs. The timescale would be far too short for the community to put an EOI in to the large funders. Large funders that you have had experience with yourself. The council knows that it's 12 weeks from putting an EOI in to the Arts Council before they come back to you. I'm sure the council know that it takes longer. The danger is that you will have possibly turned away huge investment into the borough in the magnitude of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, over the years. And we just need to save it, basically. We need to save this and get the money into Bedworth that we can get, not a fixed system that we're going to end up with. That's it, really.
Can you turn your mic off, please? Thank you. Any points of clarification? No. Nikki Smith.
When the council set out its expressions of interest process, it gave 3 months to reply. Then it took 3 months to examine the 2 bids it's received. Back in November, when the EOI was launched, we were told it was a 2-stage process. Now, we're told it was a separate informal process. But the new formal process allows for just 6 weeks to put together a plan. We still haven't seen inside the Civic Hall. The council has not provided a valuation for the building. We don't yet have the details to build on our EOI application to develop a full business plan. The time frame is also in the middle of the school holidays. When people are away, it's unrealistic and unfair. As a hard-working mom and NHS nurse manager, I already juggle work and family life whilst giving lots back to my community. I've been shocked at how hostile this council has been to people who want to do right and to give up their time and save the Civic Hall for the community use. The criteria is unfairly weighted against community use and doesn't allow enough time to submit a serious community bid. The Community Ownership Fund is open right now. If the council paused and worked with local people, we could apply for £1 million to get the Civic Hall refurbished and reopened. We've already had hundreds of people sign up to be volunteers and have spoken to other funders who would fund a manager and private backers who would run the bar. Whoever runs the Civic Hall, the Cabinet and Council should be working to make sure community use and value is a requirement for anyone to operate the venue. The level of rent shouldn't come into it. If the council just wants to hand the venue to a commercial operator, then that person should pay a commercial rent. Please don't make a decision today and look again at the criteria and timetable. We would love to sit down and talk with you, along with our local MP, Craig Tracy.
Any points of clarification? No. Mr. Moore, has Mr. Moore arrived yet? Okay. Christine Robson.
Thank you. The item on the Civic Hall is identified under Aim 1, Priority 4, and that is to prioritise the community safety and empowerment. The Cabinet is discussing the future of the Civic Hall, where the proposed selection process for the new operator has no basis for securing the safety of our borough community, nor does it offer empowerment. When the Council noted the petition its citizens submitted, it resolved that the 2-stage process of expression of interest, followed by a full bidding round, would move the running of the Civic Hall to a 3rd sector model. The proposal for the next bidding round to apportion only 20% of the marks against social value goes absolutely against this. Of course, any bid needs to be financially viable. However, an 80-20 split means that a bid that scored 0 for social value would still be a winner in the council process, no matter what the loss was to all of your voters. A timescale of only 6 weeks is loaded against a community group who have still not had any chance to see inside this Civic Hall. From the start, from promises that the Civic Hall would remain open after the NHS left, through the threats to demolish the building with no consultation, to breaking their own resolution for a 3rd sector model, the council have shown a total contempt for any community engagement. What exactly is empowerment in this borough? Why does the Cabinet seem so worried about citizens being engaged in decisions being made on their behalf? So worried by people willing to give their time freely to make the town where they live a better place? Please look again at the criteria and the timescales. They just aren't fair to our community.
Any points of clarification on that? No. Rachel Hardy.
Good evening, councillors. Nationally, Michael Gove, MP, Secretary of State, has launched a £150 million community ownership fund. He says the fund offers an opportunity for local groups to take over and run local community assets as businesses, by the community, for the community. That is these people here. He says local people often rally around against all odds to save community venues, and it's time to restack the odds in favour of communities. Again, we point to the community. The government's Levelling Up white paper also seeks to safeguard much-loved local assets, on which we cannot put a price on. The government's... I've already read that bit. Yet locally, our council have set out a criteria and a process that stacks things against a community group. You've been hostile throughout, working against local volunteers, of which a lot are your voters. You've changed the rules and you've broken promises to local people again and again and again. You told us if we could show we could run the Civic Hall profitably as a community asset, you'd give us the keys. You then said the winning bidder would be chosen on community value and a sustainable business plan. Now you aren't. Were we told you were following the letter of the Localism Act 2011, but you didn't? The council said it was working for a third sector model, but it hasn't. We have been told any bidder would have to provide the previous services the Civic Hall offered, but now they don't have to. We were told the legislation did not allow a commercial entity to submit an EOI, hence being excluded from the paperwork. Again, this turned out not to be true. We have outlined a way to bring millions to Bedworth, and that will renovate the Civic Hall and make it a viable venue that pays for itself without taxpayer subsidy, whilst retaining the community use. This will benefit users across the borough. And I believe the motto or logo, whatever you want to call it, is United to Achieve. So let's unite to achieve. This report and the actions of the council and its councillors do not secure the future of the Civic Hall as a community venue and pretty much rules us out as a community bid. Why are the local Conservatives ignoring the national Conservative government or giving Bedworth a bad deal? Why won't you work with the community to save the Civic Hall to bring millions to our town? Please don't pass what is before you today and meet with us and find a better way forward that delivers the best for Bedworth and to save the Civic Hall. Thank you.
Any points of clarification? No. Janet Batterby.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, public thanks are due to the hard-working committee of Bedworth Civic Hall, CIC, who remain focused and positive in the face of many challenges. Also, thanks to the few supportive councillors, you know who you are, and to the officers tasked with putting together this complex documentation and process. So, Bedworth Civic Hall. The clue to the future is in the title. Bedworth is a town in its own right. It should not be subsumed into being an outlier of Nuneaton, which seems to have been the policy of successive local government authorities who have failed to invest in this valuable community asset. Indeed, historically, Bedworth has closer links with Fold Hill and Coventry than with Nuneaton, and the Civic Hall was a venue servicing a wide area. Now we come to Civic. This appertains to a local community and its facilities and services. Where is the community focus when the proposed weighting is 20% only? And that split across four factors in which culture does not even appear to be mentioned. Yet Bedworth Civic Hall was acknowledged to have the best acoustics in the country before Symphony Hall. Now my neighbours' Bedworth children need to look to Solihull and Warwick for a suitable venue for their dance school's performances, and they will only be one of many. Now we come to Hall. This speaks for itself, a place for community ventures. We have a new opportunity to make Bedworth Civic Hall the centre of a new cultural quarter for the transformation of Bedworth Vision, which is your own vision, councillors. Possibly we can all get behind that concept, which would also be compliant with the current central government's philosophy of retaining existing structures where viable. So what happened to the architect's vision in 2019, which retained the Civic Hall building, just with the addition of soft landscaping, maybe rather like Kenilworth's Talisman Square, which is a community and council enterprise. I've got photographs if you want to see it. Or did Councillor Evans ditch this 2019 vision because it was commissioned by Labour and it retained our Civic Hall? That's a question that needs to be answered. Maybe it has been, but I haven't heard it. Bedworth can become a vibrant cultural centre and a venue for community services such as careers and science fairs and much more, run by the community for the community. So, councillors, how much do you love us, your community of voters? Only 20%, it would appear. In this worsening cost of living crisis, we need to look after what we already have and remind ourselves of the mantra about knowing the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Thank you.
Could you just turn your microphone off, please, Mrs. Batterby? Thank you. Any points of clarification? No. Wendy Snell.
I've voted Conservative all of my adult life because I believe them to be the party best suited to represent me and my beliefs. Since attending many council meetings recently to show support for a group working tirelessly to reopen the Civic Hall for the benefit of the community, I've been shocked to witness lies, insults and verbal abuse from some members of the council to members of the public. My local Conservative councillor has lied repeatedly to constituents about the future of the Civic Hall, and in my opinion has broken rules and standards of practice. Until I can be sure that this Conservative controlled council will be fair, honest and will respect the trust that people who vote for them give to them, I will not be voting Conservative in the future, especially at the local level.
Any points of clarification? No. Julie Whitehouse.
As a resident of Bedworth for over 66 years, I am bitterly disappointed in the appalling attitude of the council in its dealings with the Civic Hall Action Group. As someone who voted Conservative at the last local election, it is embarrassing to witness the negative attitude and poor rapport shown to an action committee who really care about the removal of the Civic Hall and the effects on the town. A town that is already reeling from the effects of poor quality local schools, closing shops, appalling road systems and overbuilding. Government has changed policy by backing the retention of community buildings, resisting attempts to demolish them and releasing funding to help retain them. Information from the council has been unhelpful, inconsistent, contradictory and generally avoiding the issues. The council have been disappointing in their reluctance to deal with the action group on a level playing field, prevaricating and continually changing the goalposts. It appears unprofessional and incompetent. Information from the council has been unhelpful, inconsistent and contradictory, generally avoiding the issues. The people of Bedworth deserve better, and the area should not be seen as an overspill of Nuneaton or Coventry. Let us all look back in time and be reminded about the history of the Civic Hall, who created it, why it was needed, and the community it was meant to serve.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification? No. Has Mr. Moore arrived? No. Okay. In which case, I'll move to any non-cabinet member. Councillor Condacor.
Chair, the Civic Hall, 13 years ago when I was first a councillor, was horrendously expensive. There was lots of things that made it expensive, including the capital charges, which are now about £280,000 a year. So, as a closed building, it costs £300,000. We get nothing for that. But we can have a new start. And if only we had this process going well, we could actually start the Civic Hall off again at around zero cost to this authority. The Civic Hall can get lots of money in a new format. And although it would need some help, that help would be nowhere near the costs that it used to have. Now, this criteria is absolutely mad. The people haven't been allowed in the building to see what they're buying. We don't know whether it's going to be done up and repaired before they take the lease. How can you buy a building? If you're going to rent a shop, you'd know the lease was including it being repaired or not repaired. There is no data for them to put a bid in. And the criteria is absolutely crazy. I could put in a wonderful bid to score 100 points. I will open this as a bicycle shop. Although the building might cost £2 million, from this I could say I'll pay you £20 a year to open it as a bicycle shop. If I was the highest bidder, that would score 80 points. I would also score points for employing people, supporting the community, being sustainable. A bicycle shop in the Civic Hall would score 100 points. This community group could actually put forward the most wonderful bid. They will pay £1 a month, £1 a year, who knows? But they could provide employment, education, community stuff. They could have dementia caps and all sorts of things in this building, and they would score maybe 16 points. My bicycle shop would score 100 points. That is clearly lunacy. We need to know how much the building is going to cost to put right, if that's included or not, what the value of the building is. Are we hiring something out that costs £1 million or £10 million? And if we give points for someone operating it commercially, they should be paying a fraction of that £1 million cost or whatever. I don't disagree that a commercial organisation cannot put this stuff on, but it has to be valued for all the community value. The community stuff has to have the 80% of the points, and who puts the highest bid in needs to be a minor thing. Putting a massive bid in and providing no benefit to the community whatsoever is a waste of the Civic Hall. And they could never put a bid in that would actually match the value of that building. It would cost so much to rebuild. It's such an asset that has been neglected. So I really ask we pause this, we do a proper process where the community have a fighting chance. We do not exclude commercial people, but the commercial people should be told you have to provide the community benefits. If the Belgrade Theatre or anyone else can come and provide all the benefits this community also wants to provide, then the community will be happy because the Belgrade Theatre or wherever would actually do what this community wants. But what you're doing is a bidding process where my bicycle shop would win the bid. I would have a wonderful bicycle shop. We could do training around the hall and things. And I might put in a bid for a bicycle shop just to show how stupid the bidding system is. But my bicycle shop could then open to the community. But they wouldn't score for that. The whole system is totally crazy. And you've changed the goalposts, and failed to provide the information. We need the value of the building. We need time for them to put in a decent bid. And we need support. I don't know if this group will fail, but we need to give them a chance. And you are actually making it impossible for them to succeed. I don't know if they'll succeed, but you're making it impossible.
Any points of clarification to Councillor Condacor? No. Councillor Shires.
I've listened, obviously, to all this, and this is such, I think, an important decision, and we need to ensure that there is a level playing field. And as somebody that has worked for the voluntary sector and gone through procurement processes, I know how difficult they can be in manoeuvring, and also how you can lose on something to another competitor when actually, you know, it comes to cost or something else. And I think with regards in looking at the procurement process, actually being able to coming up with a matrix by which we can actually establish whether people can actually meet the community developments that they're saying, whether they will actually meet education benefits, etc. Because it's very easy to say, yes, we can do this by X, Y, Z, but actually then proving that and actually having a professional in place that can say, actually you're not going to be able to achieve that. So again, I also request that the decision today is deferred.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Any points of clarification? No. Mr Hollis, do you have any points to come back on as the relevant strategic director? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand there, Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. People know me in Bedworth, and this is a comment that has been, if I was asked if I could ask this question this evening for clarification. And the question is, CIC, I have nothing against you or anybody else, and these are not my words, don't throw stones and tomatoes at me. These are words from other people in Bedworth. Is your object to save the Civic Hall? Well, obviously, you're telling me, yes, it is. So, if it is not you, and it is someone else that takes over the Civic Hall, it has been saved. Is that not the point? It has been saved by whoever takes it over, and whoever takes it over has to make it pay to survive. These are not my words. You can shout at me if you wish. That is entirely up to Chair.
Hang on.
So this is what I've been asked to ask here.
Councillor Hammersley, I think you're making the point about finances stacking up, but you can't actually ask questions of any of the public speakers.
No, not asking questions. Yeah.
Councillor Hammersley is perfectly entitled to speak as a councillor. Excuse me, I've listened to what you've had to say. Please listen to what I have to say. I've tried to pull Councillor Hammersley back onto track because I accept he's asking a question which has been raised of him. It isn't necessarily appropriate to direct it at you, but I think he's making a general point.
He went for drinks with the other bidder, and he's mates with them, and he's supporting their bid.
Mr Margrave, you've had your say.
Excuse me, Mr Gargrave. I have no friends with you.
Councillor Hammersley, no, I'm not going to entertain this
thank you.
Across the chamber. We've listened exactly to what you've had to say, and whilst I might not have... Mr Margrave. Mr Margrave, you've had your say together with your colleagues, and we have listened perfectly in silence out of respect to make sure that you are heard. Now, you've had your say. I expect you to follow the same rules as everyone else. Mr Margrave, carry on and I'll ask you to leave, because you're not doing your colleagues any favours. This isn't question and answer across the chamber. I'm sorry. Madam, I'm sorry. This isn't question... Madam, this is not... This is not question and answer across the chamber. Right, we'll move... Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the debate. Any member wish to speak? Well, I have a few points I wish to raise then in response, because I think it's important to do so. And I've listened to a lot of the points. I can't cover each and every single point which was raised. Someone mentioned about getting the best deal for the taxpayers. And I don't disagree at all with that statement. As I have said, As I have said many times in this chamber, this is about ensuring whoever gets the contract is able to make it run and succeed. And as I have said, if the CIC are the ones who can make it all stack up, good luck. But surely if someone else can score better and has the proof... Madam, you were advised it would not be read out by the officers. Because you didn't indicate you wish to speak. All members have read it. We don't read out statements now that COVID is over. That was a COVID-only measure. No, thank you. You've had your opportunity. This is about the best deal for taxpayers, and if the CIC are the best, as I've said, I wish them all the best. And I think there is some misunderstanding here about the weighting, because yes, there is an element of 20% community, but if you haven't got the finance to back it up, whatever you want to do as a community, and it could be absolutely fantastic. I have no idea, because I haven't seen the plans that you put forward, which is quite right, because it should be independent and it will be assessed independently. I haven't looked at the plans that you have submitted. But if you have great community ideas, that's great. But if you haven't got the money to back it up, you can't achieve it. And I don't want to set you up to fail. If you can get the money...
That's enough of your pathetic tone. We've had enough of your fatherly antics.
Madam, you have two options. Either be quiet or leave.
Sir, have some respect to the people that you're talking
Right.
to.
We'll adjourn the meeting until this client is down. Thank you very much. Right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for having to suspend the meeting, but there was unacceptable disruption in the gallery. I was trying to answer some of the points anyway from what was raised, but I think me speaking at this point is pretty worthless because there are a number of people who aren't willing to listen to what I have to say based on the disruptions from the gallery. So on that basis... Pardon? There are still a number of people who were causing disruption in the gallery and trying to talk over me or refuse the answers that I was giving Mrs. Batterby. If you want to talk with me by email, I'm happy to do that for what it's worth, whilst some people won't accept what I have to say. Okay, well, let me put it this way then. Okay. On the understanding that that is what you've said on behalf of the rest of the public, I understand people won't necessarily agree with me, but I am at least trying to give my explanation and the reasoning behind Cabinet's decision. So yes, we do want to give the best deal for taxpayers, as I was saying. And if it is the CIC who scores highest, I really don't mind. I don't care. If you are the one who score highest, that is the nature of the process. And to say that I don't care about Bedworth when people actually don't know my history or my family history, who actually moved to Bedworth back in the 60s, and I spent a lot of time in Bedworth because my family lived in Bedworth as well, was a bit presumptuous. But I want to tackle head-on the museum, because people have raised this, and on the face of it, it may look like a legitimate point to raise, but I want to address some of these misconceptions head-on. In the last budget round, which we went through at great pains, line by line through that, because as I've explained before, we had a £3 million deficit to balance the books. We have actually reduced the spending on the museum. We have cut out posts in the museum, not actually recruited to posts in the museum that have remained vacant, and that has resulted in a reduced service. The money which is going towards the museum is earmarked from the, now let me get this right because there are a number of funds, it's from the Towns Fund, which was part of a wider Nuneaton Transforming Nuneaton aspect. It has funding from that as part of Transforming Nuneaton. We actually did bid for money for Bedworth in the Levelling Up Fund bid, which hopefully residents will remember, which was to go towards the replacement leisure centre or physical activity hub, as it's called in the new parlance, but we all still call it a leisure centre. £15 million we got for that, for the physical activity hub, specifically for Bedworth. We are trying to work on the shortfall, which has now arisen due to the inflationary pressures because of rising costs, which I don't think anyone can deny has happened over the past 12 months. That will also involve, on top of that £15 million, £5 million worth of borrowing by this council, Section 106 money, which is from developments across the borough, Bedworth and in Arbury, actually, the £5 million Section 106 from those also going towards a new physical activity hub. So there is plenty of investment being directed into Bedworth, because I fully acknowledge that the leisure centre is well past its sell-by date, on its knees, and at some point it's at danger of closing because it's showing its age. Someone mentioned that it was built by local people and from the old Bedworth Urban District Council. No one's denying that. But since 1974, the Civic Hall has been paid for not just by Bedworth, but by Bulkington and Nuneaton too. This is about ensuring fairness across the piece. And some people, and I know they don't want to accept the argument, but it is one of the central arguments behind this. The last full operational year of the Civic Hall before COVID, after every single penny piece was brought in from ticket sales or from the bar, etc., and I can see one of the residents flipping around and going, oh, I've heard this before. Well, it bears repeating. £845,000 a year was being spent on the Civic Hall and was only ever going to increase. It was forecast to increase almost to £1 million out of a £16 million budget. That is not sustainable. Which other services do you want us to cut? The parks in Bedworth are fantastic. The Miners' Park and other parks across the borough. We spend £2 million a year just on our parks and open spaces. Do you want me to stop them being cut? No, I don't want to do that. But we have to cut our coat according to our cloth. And someone mentioned about the Community Ownership Fund. As a council, we can't apply. As a council, we can't. The best thing we can do is go through this process to assess who is the best place to take on the Civic Hall. And whoever that is, I wish them the best of luck. So now we'll move to the vote. The recommendations are as printed. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. That's the end of the Civic Hall item, so I'll wait for 5 minutes in case there are those who are just here for the Civic Hall who want to leave, to allow them a chance to leave the chamber. You're welcome to stay, but those who do want to stay, sorry, those who do want to leave, it's a natural break in the proceedings. Right, okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on to then agenda item number 7, which is reimagining the museum and art gallery parks revival. Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report provides Cabinet with a project update for the parks revival and reimaging the Nuneaton and the Nuneaton Museum and Art Gallery schemes, following the completion of the surveys designed and cost estimates to REBA Stage 3. The works at the museum will be for Phase 1. There will be a closure of the museum while the work is completed, and this can't be helped for health and safety reasons. Due to various funding streams for the project, such as the Towns Fund and the UK SPF, certain criteria outlined in the report will have to be met. The proposed works including a new layout for the George Eliot Memorial Garden, repositioning of the memorial, and the creation of an event space, widening of the underpass beneath Vicarage Street and the path between the river and Sainsbury's, the installation of a new foot cycle bridge between this path and the museum, and the business case for that is attached to the report. The parks element is as per our approved concept plan, previously adopted for Riversley Park, and delivers complementary works all round the overall transforming Nuneaton larger project and supports the bridge to living and event space. This then supports the museum works and delivering a vibrant, open and accessible area for visitors to make the most of this area of the park or museum and accessibility into the town centre. The schemes will contribute to the transformational regeneration of the town centre as part of the Town Deal programme. The proposals will bring a large number of visitors to this area of town, creating footfall and vibrancy. Museum visits already contribute to footfall and spend within Nuneaton. Increasing visitor numbers at this site will help footfall in a regenerated town centre. And I ask for approval of the recommendations as printed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Guttridge. Sorry, forgot to turn the mic on. So there are no other public speakers, so I'll turn to non-cabinet members, and Councillor Condacor has indicated.
Thank you, Chair. It looks really exciting looking at all the plans, and I took the advantage of one of the Friday afternoon talks I have at the museum to have a bit of a refresh of my memory of various bits on Friday. And it's great thinking about a new entrance onto the river and things, but I do have a couple of concerns. The real massive one is losing it for a year, because if you look on TripAdvisor, the thing you do if you take your in-laws or people visit town is take them to the museum. And that year gap is going to be catastrophic for the footfall. And it's happening about the same time, I believe, as the new hotel's opening. So we might be opening a new hotel and then closing our only tourist attraction for a year. That just doesn't seem to work. I keep suggesting, can we, instead of storing all the items in the museum, use a few of them in the town centre and possibly Bedworth town centre to have a sort of mini museum or mini art gallery in the town for the year the museum's closed. So actually we are taking advantage of the money we need to spend on storing the stuff, actually to try and mitigate some of the damage of having it closed for a year. I'm also quite keen on the idea of widening the underpass, but obviously that narrows the river. So I really wanted to ask questions about that and see the plans, and I have asked councillors if they can show me what they're thinking of, because narrowing the river just seems to make me think the museum will flood if we don't actually have some compensating space or what you're doing. So that is a big concern. And there's a wonderful Gantt chart. I'm an engineer. I look at Gantt charts on page 97. And it's a year out of date. So our project plan is a year out of date. And so I really think if we're approving this, we should actually approve it with a new Gantt chart that shows you where we are and what we're supposed to deliver. Because all the projects we're doing at the moment haven't got nice public Gantt charts. So us on the opposition can say, you said you were having procurement finished here, or you said this, and we can have something to hold you to account. So I really do ask that one of the first things you do is publish a new Gantt chart so we can see what you're doing and when, and then we can hold you to account. And finally on that point, obviously because everything's a year late almost, we've got another year's worth of inflation. So I really worry about the costs and the debt required if this is 5% or 10% more than all our plans. And if you look at what's happening to Woking at the moment, where they've discovered a £460 million hole in their valuations, yeah, we can't just keep borrowing to plug these holes. So I do ask we look at the money and the financial side of this, and it'd be useful for that bit to go to scrutiny. Thank you.
Any points of clarification? Is it a point of, if it's debate, we'll do that in a bit. Any other non-cabinet member? Councillor Shires.
Thank you. I've looked through this and it looks absolutely brilliant. I love the look of what the museum could look like. I think, again, I think for me was with what happened with the Bedworth Leisure Centre was just on the finances side, is with inflation and that, is it going to be, are we okay? Have we incorporated all that to ensure that it can still go ahead, whatever the financial year brings? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shires. Mr Hollis, do you have anything to come in on any other points?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. In terms of the funding, we need to move to REBA Stage 4, which will then find the actual financial costs in the current climate, but we can't do that until we've got approval to move forward. We've only just recently received the information from DLUC in terms of the project funds and the PAR requests. So again, we've brought this as soon as we could to Cabinet for future discussion and recommendations. And finally, in terms of the Gantt chart, that's what we had at the time when we submitted the business case in our plan, and that will be updated, Chair, as soon as we move to the next stages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hollis. Councillor Guttridge, I think you indicated you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to welcome Mr Condacor. He welcomes our hotel that we are opening, and he's been against it constantly. Concerning the museum, we will have to close the museum. It will be a building site. And I have to remind him there's a word called health and safety. Concerning the river, or the brook, or the river, or whatever we'd like to call it, we have worked closely with all authorities, Environment Agency, and I know my team in the Parks Office have worked constantly to look at that. And the revival in the George Eliot Gardens, I wish we could get it done tomorrow. It will be, you know, a place to be proud of for the borough. We have taken too much stick recently about not doing this, not doing that from opposition members. We want to get on with it, but we have to go through the right procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Any other member? No. So to address some of the points which were raised, there has been a delay, unfortunately, because of inflationary pressures, which Councillor Shires has acknowledged was an issue, as I raised earlier, with the leisure centre. We have been entering negotiations, and successful negotiations, it must be said, with DLUC and the County Council, because they some of the projects across transforming Nuneaton overlap. We have had to look at which projects are the most viable and sustainable. Savings have been made elsewhere in other projects because of other 106 contributions coming forwards, which they've been able to put towards that. So we have been able to actually secure the funding as best we can tell at the moment. And obviously the sooner we can lock that in, the better, so that we do inflation-proof what we have. That has been one of the saving graces of what we've done with Grayson Place, that because of phase one, locking it in before a lot of the inflation hit, we haven't had the delays and pressures that has generated. And I will say that again, with phase two of Grayson Place, that is exactly the same approach that we are taking to do that. It is unfortunate that it has to close, but we have some very valuable items in the museum, not least one of the most impressive collections of George Eliot memorabilia and everything that goes with it. I'm sure members will remember some time ago there was the whole debacle about, was it a desk which was stolen, which was a very valuable and one-off item. The last thing we want to do is put at risk any of these valuable collections. And it isn't as simple as adding 2 wings and you can keep going in the middle. You are going to have to add bits and connect the new 2 wings. And also there are new toilets going in. There's a new lift which is going in, because the current one is, shall I use a more technical term, knackered, or on its last legs. The sooner we can get those in, which are very, very big infrastructure items for this museum, to make it as accessible as possible. And it is supposed to be an accessible toilet, isn't it? From memory, it will enable disabled people for the first time to actually have a toilet close at hand in the park and surrounding areas, which again I know is something that Councillor Golby has been a very big champion of. So these are big ticket items we need to do. Myself and Councillor Markham and the rest of Cabinet have already discussed with officers, is there any opportunity to do outreach or put things elsewhere? That is still in the very early stages of discussion, but for example, with the talks, which Councillor Condacor mentioned, we've already had conversations at officer level. Is it something we could accommodate in the chamber temporarily? Because the chamber, unless there's an officer meeting in here, is pretty much free during the day. So that, and as we can see, it has good acoustics and the facilities that go with it. So we are very much alive to those issues, but we have to make sure that we safeguard the collections in there, because some of them are irreplaceable. And I'm sure the last thing anyone would want to see is damage done inadvertently by trying to do things on the cheap or inappropriately. Any other member? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is creation of flexible tenancies, downsizing policy and local lettings plan within the council housing stock. Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go through a few things on this and to clarify a few misconceptions that I've seen bandied about all over the place. The creation of flexible tenancies and the downsizing policy is to allow the council to encourage tenants who are currently under-occupying 4-bedroomed and above homes or homes that have been adapted for disability needs that are no longer required for adapted disability tenants to move to smaller accommodation that is more suitable. This will allow families that then require the larger sizes of accommodations or the adapted housing to be housed within the properties that are freed up. We need to create some movement within our housing stock at the moment, and I'll explain a little bit further on why we need to do that. But overall, this will have a positive impact on some of the things that we've got that aren't so positive at the moment. The adaptations as well, we have sometimes people who move into properties who the properties are then adapted to accommodate disabilities. The person with the disabilities then no longer lives in that property, and the family who remain do not need the adaptations. However, we have a lot of people who do need adaptations. So it's about matching the right properties to the right need in the circumstances. The reasons behind this, and this is as of this week data. We currently have 55 families living in temporary accommodation. Between those 55 families, there are 121 children living in temporary accommodation. That, to me, is nowhere near acceptable. We should not be allowing this to continue. So the conversations I've had with my teams is we have to look at ways, things that within our gift to actually change this. And sometimes it's a difficult decision to make, and I'm going to be brutally honest, not a lot. There's going to be some people who don't want this tenancy change to happen, but there's 121 kids in B&Bs. Do you want them to stay there? Does anybody in this room want them to stay there? Because I don't. We've got 4 and 5 bedroomed houses with one person living in them, or a couple living in them. Because they've lived there for a very long time, the kids have moved out and they've stayed there. Mum and dad have stayed there, or single parent or whatever have stayed there. And yet we've got 121 children living in B&Bs. It's not good. So I'd ask anybody that is in those properties, would you want your children living in a B&B whilst knowing that that is going on? I don't think you would. The proposal of this policy is to grant 5-year flexible tenancies on new tenancies going forwards. And again, something I'll address in a minute. So then we get to a 5-year block. You have a secure tenancy for 5 years. In the 5th year, your tenancy is reviewed. Do you still need a 4-bedroom property? Have your adult children moved out? At the moment, we have not got the capability to do that. Legally, we can't because of the tenancies that we are giving out. So this is a change to tenancies going forwards. Reviewed in the 5th year so that consideration is given to downsizing the household if there is no longer a need for a 4-bed plus house. The records that we have, and we've done our own work on this, I was very insistent that we needed the numbers to back up what we were doing. The records show that we have a lot of under-occupied 4-bed properties, 4 and 5-bed properties, and that is basically due to secure lifetime tenancy agreements. We are unable to insist on rehousing that household. We just can't do it. The tenancy policy and the new tenancy flexible tenancy agreement will be granted to all new tenancies moving into 4+ bed properties, or the ones that have been adapted. And I'm going to address some comments that I've seen online while I've got the opportunity to. So to clarify, again, this is for houses over 4 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms and above with previous adaptations. This is not a change to anybody's current tenancy agreement. So it's not a retrospective change. It will not be applied retrospectively. So I've seen many comments about this online, and it's false. It's absolutely not true. We're not dictating terms of tenancies, which is something else that I've seen. It's actually quite clear in the policy what the tenancies are going to be moving forwards. And it's not a programme of eviction. I have to stress that. This is not that. We've got around 5,800 properties in our housing stock. Currently, only 100 of those properties will be affected by this. It's minimal compared to the rest of the estate that we've got. The comments as well, such as build more houses. Under my tenure, and bearing in mind that's only just 2 years, we finished 2 housing estates and we've started 2 more. So we are building houses. The council must have money to chuck around. Well, the housing revenue account is ring-fenced, and this scheme has been fully costed. We know we can do it. And in the long term, actually, it'll save significant sums of money on our homeless accommodation costs that we have to pay out. That is actually detailed in one of the points within the Cabinet report. So, yes, it might cost us a bit of money to help people to move out, but actually, it's going to save us money in the long run. People that have lived and raised families should be able to stay. Well, under the current tenancy agreements, you can, and that is exactly the problem. Many people are desperate for somewhere to raise a family, and they simply can't because we've got no housing to put them in. We're looking to incentivise people to move out of their properties, the ones that are too big for them, and we will be offering people, as well as changing the tenancies going forward, people who want to move, we will be offering them a cash lump sum, plus help with moving costs and fees, should anybody want to take up this offer. Again, no one's being forced to do this. This is carrot and stick, if you want. More carrot than anything else. But I'd also like to remind people, there was quite a lot of chatter on particularly the Nuneaton News Facebook page, but I'd like to remind people who are criticising that ultimately the taxpayer owns these properties. So this is the taxpayer who owns the property. The tenants don't own the property. And to put it very, very bluntly, which is something that I'm known for, you own the wallpaper, but you don't own the walls that it's stuck to. That is as blunt as I can get with this. It's the reality. It's the reality of any rental. That is it. And it doesn't matter how long you've lived somewhere. That is still the reality of the situation. In lots of cases, the taxpayer is also paying for people to live in these properties too. So they are owned by the taxpayer and funded by the taxpayer. So this is about getting fairness for our current tenants, fairness for people who are, quite frankly, desperate for housing. And this is also balanced with delivering value for money for the taxpayer. And I said I'd talk about the numbers. And again, it's in this report that out of 98 4 and 5 bed properties, we know 73 of those are under-occupied. 73. That's a massive chunk of properties that are under-occupied. It's also a fact that if a change like this had been implemented years ago by the previous administration, we wouldn't have as many children in temporary accommodation as we've got now. So that should have been done. It should have been done years ago. We should have been doing things years ago. There's been a lack of long-term view and forward planning, certainly in housing, and that's come from people not wanting to make distasteful or difficult policy decisions, which I'm standing here and I'm having to make those decisions because I will remind everybody there are 121 children this week in B&Bs, and we've got 73 houses out of a total of 98 that are under-occupied. We have a problem. We have a solution, just nobody's done anything about it before. So I'm doing something about it now, and I submit this to the Cabinet for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Guthrie. Thank you. Any non-Cabinet member? I've got Councillor Condacord and Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Chair. This contains a lot of things we should be doing. We obviously need to be doing it carefully, and we need to actually understand, and it'd be interesting if we do a survey of those 78 who are under-occupied to actually really get under what are the right carrots. I think it's a very good idea we're doing this sort of thing. We have to upset someone because there's not enough capacity in the system. So trying to incentivise people to downsize who want to downsize is very useful. But I also think we need to look at the carrots and see how flexible they're applied. If someone's lived in a house for 30 years, it being a council house, they may have done the kitchen, they may have done more, they may have done a bathroom and have a wet room, or who knows what they've done in those 30 years. And so I do think we need to be prepared to make a more generous offer for people who've actually done a lot of work on their council house to encourage them to move. But I'm really in favour of looking at where we have capacity, because we have 58,000 houses in the borough and we probably have 56,000 families. So it's not a lack of housing, it's a lack, in fact, we've got empty housing, we've got some people with second homes or some people working away. It's actually trying to use a housing stock more efficiently is a good idea. The other thing that I keep on about, and I hope it also gets funded, is we have about 1,600 empty homes in the borough. A large number of those turn over and they're only empty for a month or two, but we do have some large family homes that have been empty for a long while where people have died or whatever. So I do hope we also can fund out the housing revenue account and look at trying to get some of those long-term empties to solve some of that housing problems. But I say I'm not against this policy. I think we need to try and make it work, get the data and try and work out how we encourage people who are in the right position to free up some space. And I believe we've still got some empty rooms in McCarthy and Stone. I mean, I don't know how we get things better used. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Condacord, were you talking about just rooms being empty in McCarthy and Stone in general, or us having empty rooms in McCarthy and Stone?
Just to clarify, I believe they've still got a few to let from when they built it. They're almost full, but not quite. So I say, if there was someone, if we did a survey of the people who want to downsize and someone was affluent enough to want to go in there and needed an extra nudge, I think making a list of options for them, like a menu, would be useful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacord. Just to be absolutely clear, we don't own McCarthy and Stone. It's a private company who owns that. Any other points of clarification? Councillor Golby.
So you are aware that people are free to access the private rental market under their own steam at any point in time?
Yes, I am. And it would be very useful to help them be less afraid of doing that if it's the right thing for them. I think talking to these 70 whatever households and trying to see which ones, it's not worth talking to further because they're adamant, and which ones would need some encouragement and some help. And the private sector is, as I say, McCarthy and Stones have, I believe, a couple still empty, which are obviously quite expensive end of the market. But I think giving people options and trying to get those families moved up the housing market from temporary accommodation is a great idea.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacord. No further points? Councillor Golby.
How do you know we already haven't asked the tenants about what their views are on this, or whether they need any further assistance on a ongoing, regular basis, not just surrounding everything that's going on? Because, I mean, I just have to say, the teams work really hard. And I say this all the time. There's kind of an assumption that they're not already doing what they're supposed to do or what their right thing might be. So how do you know they're not already doing this?
I don't know what they're doing at the moment, and I think it is useful if this report brought out a few options. And if I comment on this, I get criticised for criticising officers, where the officers could be doing a brilliant job and probably are doing a brilliant job. And there are lots and lots of different options, but there's also must be a reason why people aren't moving out of the larger houses. And if it's a fear of something, or if they want the family to come back for weekends, it's trying to understand the situation. And the officers probably have a very good understanding. I don't necessarily have that. And so I'm suggesting ideas, and I don't want to be attacked for suggesting ideas.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Shires.
Thank you. Listening to it, yeah, it all sounds great. I mean, I think there are lots of reasons why, unfortunately, families are in emergency accommodation. It's not necessarily due to previous policies and things. It can be family breakdown, moving to a new area, illness, eviction, lots of reasons. And even if somebody was in a 4-bedroom house 5 years ago, they could have actually been entitled to that then, and then now their children have moved out, which would change their circumstances. As when I was growing up, we started off in temporary accommodation, so I absolutely empathise 100% with the 121 children of actually what that does and what that means for life opportunities, social inclusion, etc., and potentially the views of what people have on you and what your the expectations that of where you will be in the future is because of that. So I am all for you know, people downsizing and us getting people into properties. And saying that, we need to make sure, and have we got enough properties? I know we've got quite a lot of flats that are difficult to rent at the moment, difficult to let, and they're there and we're losing money on those. So have we got enough properties for if we have a couple, a single person, for them to move into? And is it in an area that they potentially would like to, or are we having to say, sorry about this, but if you're sort of in Weddington, we're now going to move you to Stockingford or something like that? And are they some of the issues that we are facing? And with regard to what people can be scared of, I think change is just scary. Generally, if you've lived somewhere for a very long time, just the thought of moving, packing. I know the thought of going into my loft when I thought of moving was scary enough. So if anybody's got a loft like mine, you know, that can just be a reason for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Any points of clarification? Councillor Dolby.
No, not a clarification, but you've raised a good point, and I will actually come back on it if that's all right, Chair. We have done a lot of research into this in the background, and the whole point that you made about moving people on and everything else, yeah, it's all been taken into consideration. There was no point in implementing this policy if we didn't have the bandwidth within the properties to actually do it, or the finances to actually do it, or the people who would be willing to do it. So my team were given a do nothing, do something, do everything option, and we've based what we've come up with the finances and the hopes to move based on if everybody wanted to move all in one go, how much would it cost and what would we do about it? If certain amount of people wanted to move all in one go, what would we do and how much would it cost? And if no one wanted to move, what would we do and how would it cost? So we've covered all the angles. There's no point in implementing a policy that you can't actually then enforce. So it's all been covered.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support Councillor Golby's plan to put 5-year fixed tenancies in for all new tenants. If you go into the commercial world, you can have anything from a month's tenancy to 6 months tenancy to a 12 months tenancy. So I think the council is being more than generous to give a 5-year fixed tenancy with the option then to look at other options at the end of the 5-year tenancy. And it does sadden me that we've got 121 children in temporary accommodation. It saddens me deeply, and I admire Councillor Golby and her team for what they're trying to do. And I fully back the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Any other non-cabinet member? Sorry, any other cabinet member? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations as printed? Thank you very much. That is carried. That moves us on to the funding arrangements, economic development and public safety. This is a joint report between myself and Councillor Golby, which I will introduce. So we find ourselves in a position where the economic growth landscape is changing, that the Local Enterprise Partnership, also known as LEPS for short, which I'll keep going on because it's a very long phrase to use, has now been changed in its composition, and most of it has been subsumed now by the Coventry City Council and Warwickshire County Council, with some functions also going to the West Midlands Combined Authority. That means that there is now £20,000, which used to be our contribution towards the LEP, where we need to consider what we do with that funding. Also, there is the related issue about the Coventry and Warwickshire Growth Hub, which was born out of the LEP but is now a standalone organisation in its own right. And we fund those to the tune of £15,000 per year. Cabinet has had a look at the outcomes presented by the Growth Hub over the past 12-13 years, and we had some concerns about the actual impact here in Nuneaton and Bedworth. So we believe that this opportunity of the £20,000 and the £15,000 for the Growth Hub gives us a chance to look at what more we can do within our own borough, which is of more direct effect to those in Nuneaton and Bedworth and Borkington who need help, both in terms of business support, but also, as you'll see in the report, and is more Councillor Golby's area about public safety on that front. That isn't to say that there won't be the support provided by, or the types of support which were provided by the LEP and the Growth Hub available, because those functions are now subsumed, as I say, by, in our instance, Warwickshire County Council for our area. But this is about making sure we get best use out of that £35,000. Now, Cabinet could have took that as a direct saving and possibly made the finance portfolio holder a lot happier within year, but we actually wanted to invest this further into our community and our businesses to provide that support. So I'll let Councillor Golby go on about the Public Safety and Communities team, but in respect to my particular portfolio, we will see £20,000 of that invested into helping local businesses with the Town Centre's Business Grant Scheme. And we have taken the lessons of COVID and also the Shopfront Enhancement Scheme that we put into practice when we first took control of the council back in 2021 to actually look at what we found as part of those initiatives businesses wanted most or were applying for most. And we are now putting into place this £20,000 scheme every year for businesses to apply for, to make those improvements and help them keep trading, keep improving, keep growing, and hopefully keep expanding and supporting our local economies, which are the lifeblood of our town centres. And of course, every person employed is a person who is safeguarded and is able to contribute to society. And the best thing that we can do is give people that sense of worth and ability to go out and know that they have earned their place in society. So I'm happy to move the report as printed, and I believe Councillor Golby, you wish to second it and speak on your area.
Yes, it's one of the things that we've, well, I think again everybody knows that I'm quite up on the community safety stuff. One of the things that is really important is having the capacity in the team to deal with it. I know it's not diminishing in the way that I would like it, and there are a really strong team there at the moment, but they just need more hands on deck. They're doing a lot of good work. We've got the Knife Angel programme coming in, and we're restructuring the team with the overall restructure, but this will add a bit more of a restructure to the team that are dealing with ASB through communities at the moment. And I don't think we can separate the economic development side of things, because there may be an argument as to why are we using the money for the LEP, which is for economic development. Well, if you haven't got an environment where people want to come, you cannot grow in an economic sense. So actually, it makes sense to facilitate an improvement in the environment that we've got to offer businesses to come into town, or to offer shops or small units to come into the town centre. We know we've got a problem with antisocial behaviour. I've never shied away from that. We're dealing with it really well within the housing stock, but that does spill out into areas of the community that we don't have control over in a tenancy management capacity, and this will help bolster the team that do have to deal with people who are not necessarily our tenants, but who are causing problems. And if we look on page 155 on 6.2, there's a table there that I really want to see those numbers changing. But to do that, we need the capacity to address the issues that are going on. And I also would want to sort of ask people to pay a bit more attention to where their kids are and take responsibility for themselves. I think there's a big part of the ASB stuff that we've got at the moment is lack of personal responsibility. If somebody says something horrible to you, do you need to react in one way, or should you react in another way, or should you just walk away? Do you really need to go down the route of ASB, then the council have to get involved? So people do need to take personal responsibility. They need to keep an eye on where the kids are, what are the kids doing, and honestly, going a little bit off track here, get your kids off social media, for the love of God. It will rot their brains. Social media is responsible for an awful lot of problems that we've got in our communities at the moment. So as a parent, a plea is get your kids off social media. We can't do anything about that, but you don't want them running into my communities team after the fact, or after that, maybe the police, because that is the route that we often find. When my communities team get involved, there's also involvement from outside agencies like the police. But the public safety and communities are a really strong thing in this council, and I'm happy to support this, and I'm happy to second this going to Cabinet.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you. It was interesting, about a week ago, the boss of Joco was on the radio. And it made me think, when I saw this paper, where exactly do the town centres end and where is it sort of just normal shopping? So it's not really clear in this, and I think you probably have to go to our planning policy documents to see where is and isn't in the town centre. So maybe when we release this, we could actually have some guidance, and I hope it includes the areas like Queen's Road, etc., that are just outside the ring road, but are effectively still in that town centre economy. And also looking at the list of stuff you're proposing to fund, also tying in with crime, a lot of issues with shoplifting and those sort of things. So things like CCTV and things, I think should very much be in this sort of area for helping businesses. And also...
Councillor Condacourt, I think that's in the next report.
Yeah, but it can be. But I say I'm very positive about this. And I say I want it to be as wide an area as possible, our definition of the town centre. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? No? Okay. Any Cabinet member wish to come in? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That then moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And again, this is a split report between myself and Councillor Golby. Councillor Golby having more of the public community safety aspect and mind the business, regeneration and town centres. So this is an update on not only where we are with year one spending, which we have to do, but year 2, which is our current financial year, for the 3-year deal, and then next financial year, which is the final year. As you can see in the report at just under paragraph 3.3 at the top of page 169, it shows a split of the just over £4 million that we've been allocated in the borough, so that the majority of it actually does come in the year 24-25, and there is a requirement, as it shows there, that we have to have a percentage of capital spending each year. Things that I'm particularly pleased to highlight, which are coming up in this year, and also happened last year in particular, and I think Councillor Condacall referenced this slightly in the last agenda item, is the restoration of 24-hour CCTV coverage within our town centres. That is something that was asked for by a lot of businesses. It was removed in the last budget of the last Labour administration, and it is something that we've had to work to, given funding constraints. And I know that it was an unpopular measure by a number of the businesses. We have been able to use this funding for these 3 years to be able to restore that CCTV presence across our town centres. It is in place already, and hopefully the businesses will start to feel reassured about that. You'll see in here there is a lot of work going on, particularly around business, people and skills, because obviously we need to make sure that people, to be able to make the best of their situation and progress, expand, grow, is to actually have those skills in the first place. Skills are the foundation for the rest of your life, being able to go forwards. So there is provision in there for people and skills of £100,000 in this year. There is also support for local businesses in relation to £250,000 this year and £500,000 next year, and again more skills and development next year to the tune of just over £420,000. Again, there are community safety initiatives which Councillor Golby may wish to go on, but one of the things I'm actually looking forward to, and is part of this report and the policy that goes with it, are the town centres commercial units grant scheme, because one of the things that we experienced even before COVID, but was exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, is that a lot of the larger chain shops or stores were moving out of large premises, and we don't have the smaller independent spaces for smaller businesses to go to, because the existing premises are too large for them to actually be able to afford. So if there is a way of being able to modify these buildings to bring them back into use, is a win-win, I think, for this council, because it will see greater economic activity within our town centres, bring disused shops and commercial spaces into use, and hopefully bring more employment into the town centres and footfall into the town centres. We have the changing places toilets in there, which Councillor Golby again is a big fan of. There are some works being done on play and open spaces, so works being done to Riversley Park, Stockingford Rec, and also to Sherborne as well, which hasn't been replaced for almost 30 years by the time we get to it. And as I highlighted at full council last time around, we have the £716,184 on Bedworth Market Development. That is the largest element of funding within this document at all as part of the £4 million, which would see, depending on what happens with the viability assessment, what the options are for either replacement, refurbishment or relocation. And that work is already underway to begin the tender for that. And of course, the business support and skills development will go across all our town centres as well. So I think that does go to show, despite some accusations to the contrary, that we do care about Bedworth and we are investing in Bedworth. So I'm happy to move the report and recommendations as printed. Councillor Golby, do you wish to second and come in?
So again, I'll keep it brief because you've covered quite a lot. But yeah, the CCTV element was something that we were looking for ways of funding that anyway before this opportunity came up. So we do understand how much it affects people. We've got the CCTVs now funded in here through this. So I think that that is something that needs to be a positive takeaway from the businesses, or to the businesses, should I say. Again, I understand the need. I do know Jo from Joco, and I've had many a frank conversation with her, and she's very honest about the needs of businesses in the town centre. But businesses in the town centre actually need people to shop in them as well. So it cannot just be down to the council. They need shoppers. They need footfall. We can do what we can do to try and increase the footfall in the town centre, and people then need to go and share their shopping with the shops that are there. We can concentrate on that, and I think by looking at this, it shows that we are looking at improvements in order to try and increase the footfall in the town centre, in order to make the environment better for people to come in, spend their money, and also spend a bit of time. Grayson Place will be a really good addition to the town centre for that. We've overcome some hurdles to get Grayson Place off the ground, but I do think that once it starts to take fruition, that will be a major plus point in the town. It will give people a place to go that's not just about shopping. There's a big criticism that we don't have shops. We do have shops, but we need the footfall in order to encourage more shops to come. We need the change in vision to encourage more people to come in from the outside and invest. And again, I'll go back to my previous point about improving the environment and not having the ASB that we've got. It all adds up to a growth of the town centre. We are fully aware of that. We always said when we came in we would take a much more commercial approach to things, and I think we've done that. So I am quite pleased with all of this. There have been some criticisms of things that we've put in or taken out, namely the fountain. However, the fountain removal has created a nice big space now for us to put things on in the town centre, again, to encourage the footfall. Exhibitions are something that's been discussed. There is a space out there now for people to come in and use that space. If you want to put on something in the town centre, there's a nice space there for you to do it now. The Knife Angel will be here, right out there, front and centre, where we've removed that fountain. Had that not happened, we'd have ended up having to put it down at the bottom end of the town, and it just wouldn't have worked, not in the same way. So again, we've received a lot of criticism for things that actually I think in the long run will prove that we've made the right decisions. And I think the things in this document are also futuring the right decisions. And I have to say, the changing places toilets, yes, massive, massive advocate for those. Because again, when we look at, and I'll get on my little soapbox about this, when we look at how much money the purple pound, as it's called, that's people with disabilities, their carers, their families spend, it's a massive amount. And we don't have access to nearly enough of that we should. We need to create an environment that's open for everybody to come in. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, we are only one bad accident away from needing these facilities ourselves. And we should make sure that we've got these facilities open as quickly and spread about the borough as often as we can. So every opportunity, because there is an economic benefit to it. I mean, to be completely mercenary, there is an economic benefit to it, because people will actually come to the towns where these specific facilities are. So not only are we providing a service, but again, we're opening up the commercial aspect of people to come and spend their money in our borough. And that's what we should be doing. I think I'm really pleased with this, and I'm happy to second. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
There's obviously quite a few good things in this, but there's also a few things I need to point out. The CCT removal was due to a massive cut of government funding to local councils. Yeah, the councils have been so hollowed out in what they could do, and now we get these drips of money, very large drips of money for a couple of years, but we need to actually understand we have to make these things last. In terms of the fountains and those other things, we keep saying it was the benches that was important. Yeah, we talk about people wanting to come in and changing the toilets for disabled people. Really important. But they also need benches around town. And a lot of people will come in by bus. Our bus station toilets are absolutely dreadful. If we've got some money, can we also, rather than just look after the rope walk and bit of refurbishment, can we look at the bus station toilets? And can we look at some of the outlying car parks? I keep saying, now we've lost Abbey Street, we need to do a little bit of TLC to Victoria Street number 2, which is right next to Queen's Road, because a lot of people do not want or are not able to go and park in big multi-stories. It scares them. Surface car parks are very popular. And I think Victoria Street 2 is actually a great opportunity for that top end of town there. If only we'd sort out the potholes and open it up a bit so it feels less intimidating at night. I have suggested to our town centre manager maybe looking at free car parking at Paul Bank Street. We take about £700 a month there, in terms of things it would do for those on a tighter budget and get footfall at that top end of town. We really need to look at those sort of things. When I mentioned CCTV earlier in the last item, that was about CCTV in shops, little cheap systems just to make the shopkeepers happier. I'm very pleased we're getting monitoring back in the town. I think that will make a lot of people safer. And I'm really pleased we're doing some things about the Harriers and the BMX track, etc. But can we remember we took the skate park out of Bedworth? And actually that might be missing for 3 years. So if we can look at something temporary or how we bring that new skate park forward, because antisocial behaviour happens in Bedworth as well, and the skate park was well past its best, but we should be looking at what we're doing for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condicle. Any points of clarification? No? You didn't want to come in, did you? I just want to address the point about Bedworth Skate Park on that one. Councillor Condicle knows this, but it's an important point to make. The physical activity hub in Bedworth, the replacement to the leisure centre, was always designed to have a new skate park put in there. If it hadn't have been for the inflationary pressures that we have had, £6 million worth of inflationary pressures, or just over, if we hadn't have had that, we would have been making a start on the leisure centre last year, and the skate park would have been removed, and we would have been installing a new skate park as part of the works which are going on there. A brand new skate park, state-of-the-art, fit for purpose. It does not make sense at this stage to build a new one in the area, because the current area is earmarked for development of the new leisure centre. You build it somewhere else, you need planning permission for that. You've got to find somewhere first. But then that also makes the planning permission we already have for the leisure centre redundant, because the planning permission includes the new skate park. That means we have to spend more time redesigning the leisure centre with that removed, then going through the planning process again. That delays even further us getting the new physical activity hub / leisure centre that we desperately need and get it in there. And in terms of having a, in inverted commas, temporary skate park, A, we don't have the funds for it, but B, it's throwing good money after bad, because why would you have something temporary when you're going to get something permanent a few years later? It's about planning your funds and making sure you spend them wisely. And yes, I appreciate full well that it is causing some anxiousness in Bedworth. But if you look at the long-term strategy, it is the right strategy to adopt in terms of getting the most value for money, getting the best deal out of the physical activity hub once we are able to close that gap on the funding. Because actually it will be part of a wider set of activities in the park, and it is designed to be a whole area, not just for the skate park, but for running, cycling and all the other activities, which I'm sure Councillor Condicle would agree are necessary and important for Bedworth as a whole too. Any other Cabinet member wish to come in? Councillor Gutteridge.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. You've said a lot about the Miners Welfare Park and the skate park. Also, I'd like to just follow on with that. When we do the physical activity hub, at the bottom end of the Miners Welfare Park, we want to tidy that up. But I don't want to tidy that up yet till we start, when we start the development, because it'll be throwing good money after bad. So that's stage one. I fully support this, and I look forward to the BMX track, which is soon in operation with the lights, and I hope Councillor Condacor, who I know is a keen cyclist, will take full advantage of that. My office have worked tirelessly on that, and they've worked tirelessly on the Riversley Park improvements and the Stocking Ford Wreck improvements. We set out to achieve what we achieved, and we have achieved more than we thought we could. And it is all down to the officers in the Parks Department. And I think they need a bit of praise occasionally, because we do get constantly belittled. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Any other Cabinet member? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. Recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. There aren't any, and there are no other items which have been brought to my attention. Oh. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Golby.
Yeah, just, I've mentioned the Knife Angel before, but just to remind people that the date of arrival has been announced, and there was an email sent round to all councillors inviting them to get involved on the on the opening evening. So if people can respond and let the team know, that would be really useful. And also, I've had a message from one of my residents who would like me to publicly thank the fire service, who have been round to Enza's pool a couple of times recently. We have an issue with a small monk jack that got stuck in some fence and made a bit of a mess of itself, and they came and rescued it. But also to thank them for that, but also to point out that we've got some hot weather coming up, and to reiterate the safety message that the Fire and Rescue Service have put out about staying out of the water in Enza's, particularly in Enza's, because that seems to attract a lot of people. But yeah, it's a bit of a plea on the safety grounds for people to stay out of open water, buy a paddling pool, for God's sake, stay out of the water. It's not good for you, and it potentially could kill you. So just to reiterate that message. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Golby. Just to confirm that the Knife Angel launches on the 1st of June at 6:30. If you're giving a plug, need to give the details as well. Just a plea for any resident who may be watching, or if they read the good newspapers and social medias, etc. We would like to see as many people come down to Nuneaton Town Centre as possible at 6:30 on the 1st of June to see this. We are very lucky to have it in our borough, and we know it was exceptionally successful in Coventry before, and many people enjoyed it. So it's great to have it on our doorstep, and I hope it's... Yeah, but we need to make sure that the 1st of June people know it's there to come down and see. And it'll be there for a month, isn't it? Scheduled or thereabouts. Okay, in which case, thank you very much for your attendance, everyone. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.